The morning sunlight cut through Elena Rodriguez's kitchen like a surgical blade, illuminating dust motes that danced around the meticulously organized space. Her fingers, calloused from years of military service and cybersecurity work, trembled slightly as she unfolded the latest HOA violation notice. The paper was crisp, official, a weapon disguised as bureaucratic correspondence. Pinewood Estates had always been a pressure cooker of suburban tension, but Elena Rodriguez was not your typical homeowner. Her journey to this moment was etched in every line of her weathered face, a roadmap of resilience that began long before she purchased this colonial-style home on Maple Grove Lane. 3 military tours had taught her that battles were won through strategy, patience, and an intimate understanding of your opponent's weaknesses. The United States Marine Corps had transformed her from a restless young woman from a working-class neighborhood in East Los Angeles into a cybersecurity expert with a razor-sharp mind and an unwavering moral compass. The native plant garden that now sat in the crosshairs of the Pinewood Estates Homeowners Association was more than just landscaping. It was a living memorial, a testament to her father, Rafael Rodriguez, a landscape architect who had dedicated his life to ecological restoration. Each carefully selected plant represented a memory, a lesson, a piece of family history lovingly cultivated in rich, dark soil. Elena remembered her father's calloused hands guiding her small fingers as a child, explaining the intricate relationships between native plants, local ecosystems, and environmental sustainability. Maija, he would say, every plant tells a story. Every root has a purpose beyond what the eye can see. Now Thomas Blakely and the HOA were threatening to erase that story. The violation notice was a masterpiece of bureaucratic aggression. Typed in sterile government-grade font, it outlined multiple infractions: native grasses exceeding 12 inches in height, unauthorized plant species, deviation from the mandatory landscaping guidelines that demanded uniform Bermuda grass and precisely trimmed hedges. A $500 weekly fine would be imposed until the garden was brought into compliance, a euphemism for total destruction. Elena's military training kicked in. Where others might see a devastating blow, she saw an opportunity. Her cybersecurity background had taught her that every system had vulnerabilities, and the Pinewood Estates OA was no exception. She walked through her garden, touching each plant with reverence, the milkweed attracting monarch butterflies, the native bunch grasses providing habitat for local wildlife, the carefully selected drought-resistant plants that required minimal water. Each was a strategic choice, not a random collection. This wasn't just a garden. It was an ecological statement. Her neighbors watched her with a mixture of curiosity and fear. The Rodriguez garden stood in stark contrast to the uniform, chemically maintained landscapes that dominated Pinewood Estates. Some residents whispered about her military background, about the strange woman who seemed to challenge every unspoken rule of suburban conformity. Thomas Blakely, the HOA board president, represented everything Elena had fought against her entire life: systemic oppression disguised as community standards. A retired corporate lawyer with a perfectly manicured lawn and an obsession with control, he viewed her garden as a personal affront to his vision of suburban perfection. Little did he know, Elena Rodriguez was preparing for a war he couldn't possibly understand. She opened her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. Satellite imagery, environmental impact studies, local ecological reports. She would build a case so comprehensive that the HOA's arbitrary rules would crumble under the weight of scientific evidence. This was more than a dispute over landscaping. This was a battle for individual rights, for environmental sustainability, for the right to express oneself beyond the suffocating constraints of suburban uniformity. The first battle lines were drawn, and Elena Rodriguez was ready. The war room, as Elena called her home office, was a testament to her methodical approach. Multiple monitors flickered with data, satellite images, and municipal records spread across an oversized mahogany desk. Her military-issue coffee mug, a relic from her last deployment, steamed quietly as she began her counteroffensive against the Pinewood Estates Homeowners Association. Elena's first move was comprehensive digital reconnaissance. Her cybersecurity background provided tools most HOA board members couldn't comprehend. She began by mapping the digital footprint of Pinewood Estates, starting with Thomas Blakely himself. Public records revealed a pattern of selective enforcement that made her blood boil. The Hendersons, a wealthy retired couple at the end of Maple Grove, maintained a koi pond that clearly violated multiple HOA water feature restrictions. The Clarksons had an elaborate gazebo that exceeded height limitations by at least 2 feet, yet no violation notices had ever graced their mailboxes. Her native garden, by contrast, was a masterpiece of ecological design. Each plant served a purpose: the milkweed supporting monarch butterfly populations, native grasses providing critical habitat for local wildlife, drought-resistant species, minimizing water consumption. It was a living ecosystem, not a violation. Elena began collecting expert testimonies. Dr. Maria Gonzalez, a renowned local ecologist, became her first ally. The professor's research on urban biodiversity provided scientific ammunition against the HOA's narrow landscaping guidelines. Your garden, Dr. Gonzalez explained during a detailed consultation, is actually a model of sustainable urban landscaping. What the HOA considers a violation is, in fact, an ecological asset. The investigation expanded. Elena used her cybersecurity skills to access public databases, cross-referencing HOA violation records with property ownership, income levels, and demographic data. A disturbing pattern emerged. Minority homeowners and middle-class residents faced significantly more frequent and aggressive enforcement compared to wealthy, predominantly white homeowners. Thomas Blakely's background became a primary focus. A retired corporate lawyer with deep roots in the community, he represented a dying breed of suburban gatekeepers. His LinkedIn profile and local business connections painted a picture of someone who viewed community standards as a tool for maintaining social control. Local environmental regulations became Elena's most potent weapon. She discovered that her garden actually exceeded municipal guidelines for water conservation and native plant preservation. The city had recently passed ordinances encouraging exactly the type of landscaping she had implemented. Neighborhood dynamics added another layer of complexity. Some residents whispered support, others maintained fearful silence. Elena documented everything: every conversation, every piece of correspondence, every subtle indication of the HOA's systematic overreach. Her military training proved invaluable. Intelligence gathering was about connecting dots, understanding systems, identifying vulnerabilities. The HOA was just another system to be analyzed, its weaknesses mapped and exploited. Drone footage became an unexpected ally. Using a high-resolution camera purchased specifically for this investigation, Elena captured detailed images of neighboring properties. Each photograph was meticulously tagged, dated, and analyzed. The visual evidence would prove crucial in demonstrating the HOA's inconsistent enforcement. Local environmental groups began to take notice. The Southwest Urban Ecology Foundation expressed interest in her case, offering preliminary support and additional expert testimony. What had started as a personal battle was transforming into a potential landmark case for urban environmental rights. By the time Elena finished her initial investigation, she had compiled a dossier that would make most military intelligence units proud. Spreadsheets, satellite images, expert testimonies, municipal records, each document was a carefully placed piece of strategic artillery. Thomas Blakely and the Pinewood Estates HOA had no idea what was coming. The investigation was complete. The real battle was about to begin. The conference room of Martinez and Associates Legal Services buzzed with an electric tension. Elena Rodriguez sat across from Alejandro Martinez, a civil rights attorney with a reputation for taking on seemingly impossible cases. Her meticulously organized file, a 3-inch thick binder of documentation, landed on the polished mahogany table with the weight of a declaration of war. "This isn't just about a garden," Elena began, her voice steady and calculated. "This is about systemic discrimination, environmental rights, and the abuse of HOA power." Alejandro Martinez was no stranger to complex litigation. His office walls were adorned with awards from landmark civil rights cases, each frame a testament to battles fought and won against institutional oppression. He leafed through the documentation, his experienced eyes catching nuanced details that would make most lawyers salivate. The evidence was damning. Satellite imagery showed at least 17 properties in Pinewood Estates with landscaping violations more significant than Alina's native garden. Financial records revealed a pattern of selective enforcement that targeted specific homeowners, predominantly minorities and middle-class residents. The racial angle is subtle but present, Martinez noted, tracing his finger along a spreadsheet documenting violation notices. Look here. Violation frequency doesn't correlate with actual landscaping infractions. It correlates with homeowner demographics. Alina's military precision was evident in every document. Cell phone records, drone footage, expert ecological testimonies. Each piece of evidence was meticulously cataloged and cross-referenced. She had transformed her garden dispute into a potential class action lawsuit that could reshape HOA governance. The first legal salvo would be a cease and desist letter, but not the kind Thomas Blakely would expect. Instead of defending, they would go on the offensive. The letter would outline the HOA's multiple violations of municipal environmental guidelines, fair housing regulations, and their own established bylaws. Martinez pulled up municipal environmental ordinances that directly supported Alina's landscaping choices. The city had recently passed progressive guidelines encouraging native plant ecosystems, water conservation, and support for local wildlife habitats. Her garden wasn't just compliant, it was a model of urban ecological design. They've walked right into a legal minefield, Martinez chuckled, a predatory smile crossing his face. Blakely and the HOA board have no idea what's coming. The strategy was multilayered. First, they would challenge the fine through administrative channels. Simultaneously, they would prepare documentation for a potential federal civil rights investigation. The HOA's pattern of selective enforcement opened multiple legal vulnerabilities. Alina's cybersecurity background proved invaluable. She had documented every interaction, every email, every communication with the HOA board. Digital forensics would reveal communication patterns that suggested deliberate targeting. This isn't just about my garden anymore, Alina explained. This is about breaking a system of suburban oppression that's existed for decades. HOAs have been used as tools of social control, pushing out diversity and enforcing a narrow vision of community. Martinez nodded, understanding the deeper implications. What seemed like a simple landscaping dispute was actually a potential landmark case challenging decades of institutionalized discrimination. The next step would be gathering additional plaintiffs, other homeowners who had experienced similar treatment. Alina's investigation had already identified potential allies, homeowners who had been silenced by fear of HOA retaliation. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the law office, a battle plan took shape. Thomas Blakely and the Pinewood Estates HOA board would soon receive a legal communication that would shake their world. Alina Rodriguez was no longer just defending her garden. She was challenging an entire system of suburban governance. The war had officially begun. The emergency HOA board meeting descended into chaos faster than Thomas Blakely could have imagined. Fluorescent lights flickered over a room filled with nervous board members, their carefully pressed suits suddenly feeling too tight, too constraining. "We cannot back down," Blakely hissed, slamming a manila folder onto the conference table. "Rodriguez is setting a dangerous precedent. If we let her win, the entire community structure falls apart." Margaret Hempsworth, the board's longest-serving member, shifted uncomfortably. At 67, she had seen her share of homeowner disputes, but this felt different. Alina Rodriguez was not a typical resident to be intimidated or silenced. The cease and desist letter from Martinez and Associates had arrived like a legal neutron bomb. Its meticulously documented evidence of selective enforcement, potential civil rights violations, and environmental regulation breaches left the board scrambling. What had seemed like a simple landscaping dispute had morphed into an existential threat to their decades-long method of community control. Blakely's strategy was aggressive. He would fight fire with fire. Within hours, a comprehensive investigation into Alina Rodriguez's background was launched. Private investigators were discreetly hired, social media accounts combed, every digital footprint examined. They were looking for any potential weakness, any vulnerability they could exploit. But Alina was no ordinary target. Her military record was impeccable. 3 tours of duty, multiple commendations, a distinguished service record that read like a playbook of integrity. Cybersecurity credentials from top-tier institutions. No criminal record, no financial improprieties, no skeletons in her carefully maintained closet. The board's frustration mounted. Meanwhile, local media began to catch wind of the brewing conflict. A young reporter from the Pinewood Chronicle, Sarah Chen, started digging. Her initial calls to the HOA were met with defensive stonewalling, which only fueled her investigative instincts. "This is bigger than a garden," Chen muttered to herself, connecting the dots between Alina's case and a pattern of similar disputes across suburban communities. The HOA's first public counterattack came swiftly. A strongly worded press release accused Alina of deliberately undermining community standards, of creating a hazardous and unkempt environment that threatened property values. They doubled down on the weekly $500 fine, adding additional penalties for continued non-compliance. But Alina and Alejandro Martinez were prepared. Within 48 hours, a comprehensive media package was distributed. High-resolution images of the garden, expert ecological testimonies, detailed documentation of the garden's environmental benefits, each piece carefully crafted to dismantle the HOA's narrative. Local environmental groups began to rally. The Southwest Urban Ecology Foundation issued a public statement supporting Alina's landscaping choices. Social media erupted with support, #SaveElinaGarden trending locally. Thomas Blakely watched in mounting horror as his carefully constructed world began to unravel. This was no longer about a garden. This was a full-scale rebellion against the traditional mechanisms of suburban control. In the Rodriguez household, Alina remained calm. Each media attack, each legal maneuver from the HOA was just another data point, another piece of evidence in the larger case she was building. The war had truly begun. Her father's words echoed in her mind. Every plant tells a story. Every root has a purpose. Now, her garden would tell a story of resistance. The Pinewood Estates Community Meeting Hall had never been so packed. Folding chairs creaked under the weight of tension, whispers creating a low, anxious hum that seemed to vibrate through the wood-paneled walls. What had begun as a routine HOA gathering had transformed into a battlefield of ideologies, with Alina Rodriguez's garden at the epicenter of a brewing storm. Thomas Blakely stood at the podium, his perfectly pressed suit a stark contrast to the mounting chaos. His fingers gripped the sides of the lectern, knuckles white, betraying a composure that was more performance than substance. "The issue before us," he began, voice carefully modulated, "is about maintaining community standards. Ms. Rodriguez's so-called garden is nothing more than a deliberate attempt to undermine." Lies. The interruption came from Dr. Marcus Reyes, a retired botanist seated near the front. "That garden is an ecological marvel." The room erupted. Decades of pent-up frustration burst forth, not just about Alina's garden, but about years of HOA overreach, selective enforcement, and suburban conformity. Rebecca Liu, a young environmental lawyer who had recently moved into the neighborhood, stood up. "I've reviewed the documentation," she announced, her voice cutting through the noise. "The HOA is potentially in violation of multiple municipal environmental ordinances." Sides were forming. The old guard, mostly older, white homeowners who had controlled the neighborhood for decades, clustered on one side. Younger residents, environmental advocates, and those who had long felt marginalized began to coalesce on the other. Alina sat near the back, observing. This was strategy as much as confrontation. Every outburst, every passionate speech was another piece of evidence, another crack in the HOA's facade of authority. Behind the scenes, the legal maneuvering intensified. Alejandro Martinez was building a class action potential, identifying other homeowners who had faced similar HOA harassment. What had started as Alina's personal battle was becoming a neighborhood-wide reckoning. Social media amplified the conflict. Local news channels picked up the story. Sarah Chen from the Pinewood Chronicle was crafting a deep-dive investigative piece that promised to expose years of HOA misconduct. The most unexpected ally emerged from an unlikely source. Harold Thompson, a 78-year-old retired engineer and longtime HOA supporter, approached Elena after the meeting. "My wife was a botanist," he said quietly, showing her photographs of his own backyard from decades past. "We used to believe in working with nature, not fighting it." His support was symbolic of a deeper shift happening within the community. The HOA's traditional power structure was crumbling, exposed by Elena's strategic resistance. Blakely's counterattack was swift and desperate. Additional fines were levied. Legal notices were drafted, but each move seemed to backfire, drawing more attention to the underlying issues of power, conformity, and environmental stewardship. Local environmental groups began organizing. The Southwest Urban Ecology Foundation saw Elena's garden as more than a personal battle. It was a potential landmark case for urban ecological design. Community meetings became battlegrounds of ideology. Elena rarely spoke, but her presence was a constant reminder of resistance. Each accusation, each attempt to marginalize her only strengthened her position. "This isn't about a garden," Elena would later tell a reporter. "This is about the right of individuals to make responsible choices, about community that means more than uniform grass and perfect hedges." As the sun set on Pinewood Estates, the neighborhood was forever changed. Lines had been drawn, alliances formed and broken, and at the center of it all, a garden stood, a living testament to resistance, biodiversity, and the power of standing one's ground. The real battle was just beginning. The county courthouse had seen its share of contentious cases, but nothing quite like the Rodriguez v. Pinewood Estates Homeowners Association hearing. The courtroom buzzed with an electricity that transcended a typical municipal dispute. Press cameras clicked, local activists whispered, and the weight of community tension hung in the air like summer humidity. Alejandro Martinez approached the podium with the precision of a surgical strike. His opening statement was a masterpiece of legal strategy, transforming a garden dispute into a landmark civil rights case. "This is not about landscaping," he began, his voice resonating through the wood-paneled courtroom. "This is about systemic discrimination, environmental justice, and the fundamental right of homeowners to make responsible ecological choices." The evidence was overwhelming. Satellite imagery, municipal environmental reports, expert testimonies, each document painted a damning picture of the HOA's selective enforcement. Dr. Maria Gonzalez, the ecological expert, delivered testimony that was nothing short of revolutionary. "Ms. Rodriguez's garden is not just compliant with city environmental guidelines," she explained, displaying detailed ecological maps. "It is a model of urban biodiversity. The plants support local pollinators, reduce water consumption, and create a sustainable ecosystem that benefits the entire community." Thomas Blakely's legal team scrambled. Their arguments crumbled under the weight of scientific evidence and meticulous documentation. What had seemed like a simple violation now exposed years of discriminatory practices within the Pinewood Estates OA. Behind the scenes, the investigation had uncovered more than anyone anticipated. Financial records revealed a pattern of preferential treatment. Wealthy homeowners routinely escaped scrutiny, while minority residents faced constant harassment. Elena's cybersecurity skills had uncovered digital communication trails that suggested systemic bias. The most damning evidence came from unexpected sources. Retired HOA board members, some suffering from late-life guilt, began to come forward. Harold Thompson, the elderly engineer who had supported Elena, provided internal documents that suggested years of intentional discrimination. "We didn't see it as racism," one former board member testified, his voice cracking. "We thought we were protecting property values, but looking back, we were maintaining a system of exclusion." Elena sat calm and composed. Her military training had prepared her for high-stakes confrontations. Each moment in court was another strategic move in a much larger battle. The media coverage exploded. What had started as a local dispute was now a national conversation about suburban governance, environmental rights, and community standards. Social media buzzed with hashtag #SaveElenaGarden, with environmental activists and civil rights groups rallying behind her cause. Blakely's world was unraveling. His reputation, carefully constructed over decades, crumbled under the weight of evidence. Property management companies began distancing themselves. Longtime allies turned silent or disappeared entirely. The court proceedings became more than a legal battle. It was a referendum on decades of suburban HOA practices. Experts testified about the ecological importance of native landscaping. Civil rights attorneys drew parallels to broader systemic discrimination. This case is about more than one garden, Elena would later tell reporters. It's about the right of individuals to make responsible choices, about creating communities that value diversity, sustainability, and individual expression. As the first day of hearings concluded, it was clear that something fundamental had changed. The traditional power structures of suburban governance were being challenged, with Elena Rodriguez at the epicenter of a potential revolution. The garden, that small patch of carefully cultivated native plants, had become a symbol of resistance. The real battle was just beginning. The verdict came down like a thunderclap on a cloudless day. The courtroom fell silent as the judge delivered a ruling that would reshape suburban governance across the state. Pinewood Estates Homeowners Association was found guilty of multiple violations: discriminatory enforcement, environmental misconduct, and systematic overreach. Elena Rodriguez stood stoically, her military posture a stark contrast to the crumbling demeanor of Thomas Blakely and his legal team. The monetary damages were significant, but the reputational destruction was total. The financial penalty was just the beginning. The court mandated comprehensive reforms for the HOA, including mandatory diversity and environmental sensitivity training for all board members, independent oversight of violation notices, elimination of subjective landscaping guidelines, creation of an appeals process for homeowners. News outlets across the country picked up the story. What had begun as a local dispute about a garden had transformed into a landmark case challenging decades of suburban regulatory practices. "This isn't just a victory for me," Elena told reporters outside the courthouse, her voice calm but resolute. "This is a victory for every homeowner who has been silenced, every ecosystem threatened by unnecessary regulations." The ripple effects were immediate and far-reaching. Homeowners associations across the state began internal reviews, terrified of becoming the next target of similar litigation. Municipal governments started reevaluating landscaping ordinances that had long favored sterile, water-intensive lawn designs. Dr. Maria Gonzalez found herself inundated with requests from communities seeking ecological consultations. Her testimony during the trial had become a blueprint for sustainable urban landscaping. Universities began developing new coursework exploring the intersection of environmental design, community governance, and civil rights. Thomas Blakely's fall from grace was complete. Once a powerful figure in local real estate and community management, he now became a cautionary tale. Former allies distanced themselves, professional networks collapsed, and his lifetime of carefully constructed influence crumbled. The most unexpected transformation occurred within the Pinewood Estates community itself. Neighbors who had long been divided began to talk, to understand each other. Harold Thompson, the retired engineer who had initially supported Elena, started a neighborhood initiative promoting native plant gardens. Social media campaigns and local environmental groups used the case as a rallying point. #ReclaimMoreCommunities trended, with homeowners sharing stories of HOA overreach and environmental resistance. Legal experts began describing the case as a potential turning point. Law schools added the Rodriguez v. Pinewood Estates case to their curriculum, analyzing its complex implications for property rights, environmental law, and community governance. Elena's cybersecurity background proved crucial in documenting the entire process. She worked with civil rights organizations to create a comprehensive database of HOA violations, providing a resource for homeowners fighting similar battles. The Southwest Urban Ecology Foundation established the Elena Rodriguez Environmental Justice Fund, providing legal and scientific support for homeowners challenging restrictive landscaping regulations. During a congressional hearing on urban environmental policy, Elena was invited to testify. Her measured, fact-driven testimony highlighted the broader issues of community governance and environmental sustainability. "Our communities are living ecosystems," she told the committee. "They should be treated with the same respect and complexity we afford to natural landscapes." As winter approached, Alina's garden stood as a testament to resilience. The native plants, having weathered both literal and metaphorical storms, continued to thrive. What had once been seen as a violation was now recognized as a model of ecological responsibility. The battle was won, but the war for sustainable, inclusive communities was just beginning. 5 years had passed since the landmark court case that had transformed Pinewood Estates and sparked a national conversation about community governance, environmental sustainability, and individual rights. Alina Rodriguez stood at the edge of her garden, now a certified wildlife habitat and environmental education site. What had once been a point of contention was now a beacon of hope, a living testament to the power of individual resistance and ecological stewardship. The garden had become more than just her personal space. Local schools brought students on field trips, learning about native ecosystems, pollinator support, and community resilience. What began as a personal battle had evolved into a movement. Her father's legacy lived on in every carefully cultivated plant. Rafael Rodriguez's vision of ecological harmony had found its most powerful expression in his daughter's unwavering determination. The Alina Rodriguez Environmental Justice Center, established in the wake of her legal victory, had become a national resource. Homeowners from across the country sought guidance in challenging restrictive HOA regulations, understanding their environmental rights, and creating sustainable living spaces. Thomas Blakely had disappeared from public life, a cautionary tale of institutional arrogance. The once powerful HOA board member now lived in reduced circumstances, his network of influence completely dismantled by the very system he had once controlled. Pinewood Estates had transformed. Native plant gardens now dotted the neighborhood. The sterile, water-intensive lawns had given way to diverse, ecologically rich landscapes. What was once a symbol of suburban conformity had become a model of environmental responsibility. Alejandro Martinez, the attorney who had stood by Elena throughout her legal battle, had become a leading voice in environmental civil rights law. Their partnership had changed not just a community, but the entire approach to suburban governance. Alina's military background continued to inform her approach. Discipline, strategic thinking, and unwavering commitment had been her greatest weapons. She had fought a different kind of battle, one that challenged systemic oppression through knowledge, persistence, and ecological understanding. The Southwest Urban Ecology Foundation had expanded its programs, directly inspired by her case. Grants now supported homeowners seeking to transform their landscapes, providing scientific support and legal resources. During a speaking engagement at her alma mater, Elena reflected on the journey. This was never about winning, she told a packed auditorium of environmental science and law students. This was about creating a different way of understanding our relationship with the spaces we inhabit. Her cybersecurity background proved invaluable in documenting and sharing the story. A comprehensive digital archive now existed, tracking the legal battle, its implications, and the subsequent transformations in community governance. The federal government had taken notice. New guidelines for homeowners associations now included mandatory environmental sensitivity training, more transparent enforcement protocols, and protections for ecological diversity. Harold Thompson, the retired engineer who had first supported her, had become a close friend and collaborator. Together, they continued to advocate for more inclusive, sustainable community designs. As the sun set over Pinewood Estates, Elena walked through her garden. Monarch butterflies danced among milkweed plants. Native grasses swayed in the evening breeze. Each plant told a story of resistance, of hope, of the possibility of change. The garden was more than a landscape. It was a revolution. Her father's words echoed in her mind. Every plant tells a story. Every root has a purpose. She had found her purpose, and the story was still being written.